Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira, on Rajya Sabha television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events that have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. A top UN official recounts heartbreaking and horrific accounts of sexual atrocities by Myanmar soldiers against Rohingya Muslim women, urges body to visit the region and demand an end to attacks on civilians. US Federal Communications Commission votes to repeal rules that ensure free and open internet. Move expected to allow internet service providers to decide what content consumers can access. Russia, India and China decide to act unitedly against terrorist organizations proscribed by United Nations Security Council, also resolved to work in tandem to destroy weapons of mass destruction. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres warns the world against sleepwalking into war over North Korea, calls for diplomatic efforts to banish nuclear weapons from the Korean Peninsula. Our top focus on the program this week. The United Nations can help Myanmar to diffuse intercommunal tensions and create an environment for safe and dignified repatriation of Rohingya refugees, the organization said on Tuesday. A top official stressed that the country could also tap the UN's capacities and experience in tackling other challenges, including democratic consolidation. Here's a detailed report.
A top UN official recounted to the Security Council on Tuesday heartbreaking and horrific accounts of sexual atrocities by Myanmar soldiers against Rohingya Muslim women, urging the body to visit the region and demand an end to attacks on civilians.
Over the course of 3 days, I heard the most heartbreaking and horrific accounts of sexual atrocities reportedly committed in cold blood out of a lethal hatred for the Rohingya community based on their ethnicity and religion.
Pramila Patten, Special Envoy of the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on sexual violence in conflict, said one woman told her she was held by Myanmar troops for 45 days and raped repeatedly, while another woman could no longer see out of one eye after it was bitten by a soldier during a sexual assault.
One survivor described being held in captivity by members of the Myanmar Armed Forces, the Tatmadaw, for 45 days, during which time she was reportedly raped over and over again. One woman showed me how she can no longer see out of her left eye, which was bitten by a soldier during a vicious sexual assault. Some witnesses reported women and girls being tied to either a rock or a tree before multiple soldiers literally raped them to death. Some women recounted how soldiers drowned babies in the village well. A few women told me how their own babies were allegedly thrown in the fire as they were dragged away by soldiers and gang raped.
Patten said the 15-member Security Council should visit Myanmar and Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, where more than 6,26,000 refugees have fled to since violence erupted in Myanmar's northern Rakhine state on August 25th this year.
A Security Council resolution demanding an immediate end to violations against the civilian population in Rakhine State and measures to hold the perpetrators accountable would send an important signal.
Myanmar's army released a report last month denying all allegations of rapes and killings by security forces.
We see an investigation by the Burmese military that denies all responsibility. This is unacceptable. Burma must allow an independent, transparent, and credible investigation into what has happened. Allowing full access for the UN fact-finding mission to gather information and evidence from the ground is vital to accountability and a solution to the crisis. We cannot allow more time to pass. There is no denying that these atrocities, include ethnic cleansing, have taken place.
Myanmar has been stung by international criticism for the way its security forces responded to the August 25th attacks by Rohingya militants on 30 security posts. Last month, the Security Council urged the Myanmar government to ensure no further excessive use of military force in Rakhine State.
Before they can return, Burmese authorities must create an environment that is safe for people to return voluntarily to their homes. It is more than just a process. There must be a cultural change, which only Burmese leadership can do. While we are hearing promises from the government of Burma, we need to see action.
Meanwhile, China's Deputy UN Ambassador Wu Haitao said the crisis had to be solved through an agreement between Myanmar and Bangladesh.
Programs reached under strong pressure from outside may ease the situation temporarily, but will leave negative after effects.
The two countries signed an agreement on voluntary repatriation on November 23rd, but UN Political Affairs Chief Jeffrey Feltman pushed on Tuesday for the United Nations to be involved in any operation to return the Rohingyas.
But we again urge tangible action and implementation of these commitments. Plans alone are not sufficient. We hope Myanmar will draw upon the wealth of expertise the UN can offer.
The Rohingya are a stateless Muslim minority who have long experienced persecution in Myanmar. They are denied citizenship by the country where they are seen as immigrants from Bangladesh. The government does not use the term Rohingya but calls them Bengali Muslims. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, joining me for a chat this week to talk about this is the editor of the Hardnews, Sanjay Kapoor. Welcome and thank you for joining me on the program. Some tales of horror being retold from the Rakhine State in Myanmar. The UN, of course, is taking this issue very seriously. But do you see any kind of a solution coming out of all of this?
You know, it is rather strange that there is so much of media reporting. You have independent groups who are writing about it, reporting from there. You had the MSF, which had just submitted a report which appeared some time back. And more and more heartrending details are coming out. But as it happened with what we saw in many years ago in Yugoslavia, then we saw in Syria and many countries, we find the United Nations absolutely, in a certain way, inadequate to the task of stopping this kind of atrocities. They had a provision of a right to protect R2P, in which they could get into a country and find a way to somehow save the people. But it has been criticized so many times that United Nations is not able to even respond to that provision which was there. So in a certain way, I don't know how much it can be possible, what they will do. Some time back, you also had China, which was promising to work with the Myanmarese government, Aung San Suu Kyi, who's a state councillor, and find a way to stabilize the situation. But there too, I don't know how it is all panning out, because China is for the first time trying to get into and trying to stabilize communities or societies which are racked with violence. They don't have a track record. They don't have what it really takes to credentials to do it. But they were attempting, and I thought for a change maybe they will be able to do something more meaningful. But here again, I don't think it is happening.
Who do you think should take the lead then to try and negotiate, try and mediate, and because at the end of the day, innocent people are suffering.
No, fundamentally the problem is Myanmar. If you look at the Nobel Prize laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, she has not even mentioned them as as Rohingya. She calls them Bengalis. And when you don't recognize their status, when you don't recognize their identity, and you call them Bangladeshis or Bengalis, you actually suggest that they should go back to Bangladesh. And she doesn't recognize the conflict which is there. She would not like to be on the wrong side of the Burmese majority community, the Buddhists who control the narrative, or the Myanmarese army, which is very adamant that they will, stabilize the situation their own way by resorting to violence, resorting to the kind of genocide that we haven't seen in a long time. So in a certain way, things have to get sorted out within their own country. So even if you repatriate, if you rehabilitate, bring the refugees back from Bangladesh, who are about 1 million odd now.
But the key is it should be voluntary.
No, it should be voluntary. They should set them up. But how do you kind of, work out a situation around the place where they have the camps, where they are living, that there are no further attacks, where there is no, vigilantes attacking the Rohingyas? Because what will really happen that once they come back, they are going to hold Rohingyas responsible for the international ire which may be directed against the Burmese government or the Burmese army. And it will take a little while to somehow sort matters out, because you've seen it in Sri Lanka. You had the Tamils and the Sinhalas who had this huge, conflict going on for years. And the matter, although has ended after a very violent face-off which took place in 2009, and it extinguished many, many people, and the situation came to a, some kind of tranquility is there, but the violence in the mind is still there. It might just erupt any time. So in a certain way, if you look at it, the Rohingya has to be sorted out within. There has to be.
So you're saying you have to leave it to Bangladesh and Myanmar to sort out the problem, and any external factor will only complicate things.
It will complicate in a certain way, but there has to be truth and reconciliation which should take place in Myanmar. There was an attempt which was made by Aung San Suu Kyi. She responded to the international situation. She got Kofi Annan to put together a report, which he did. So if you remember, he submitted a report the same day the matter blew up on August 25th, when you had the Rakhine State Salvation Army attacking, and there were about 57 whom they call militants, we call them terrorists or whatever, they were killed.
Sure.
And there's some soldiers who were killed. But that was kind of end to the entire peace initiative she had taken. And Kofi Annan made some interesting, you can say, suggestions and observations, where he said that, they should be given citizenship, there should be attempts to rehabilitate them, jobs, connectivity, the entire package. And that is the way to go forward.
Sure.
But it ends up being a zero-sum game, because it's a very poor country, and the majority community would think that why are you investing in people whose identity is not even known? They could be foreigners. They could be people who should go back to Bangladesh. So that conflict has to somehow be reduced.
In the minds is what you're suggesting.
People,
okay, all right. On that note then, thank you so much, Sanjay Kapoor, for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, moving on now, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said a unified effort to fully implement sanctions on North Korea are key to resolve the country's growing missile and nuclear threat. He also said that North Korea must be denuclearized for peace and stability in the region. Guterres said this in Japan, where he was attending an international conference on universal health coverage earlier this week. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said Washington is open to possible talks with North Korea, but the White House said that Pyongyang must not only refrain from provocations, but take sincere and meaningful actions towards denuclearization.
We had also the opportunity to discuss the nuclear threat that we today face in relation to the North Korea program. It is very clear that Security Council resolutions need to be fully implemented by North Korea, first of all, but fully implemented by all the other countries whose role is crucial in order to make sure that the sanctions are put in place and that they achieve the result that we all aim, which is the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
So we need the DPRK to come to the table for talks. We're ready to talk anytime they'd like to talk. But they have to come to the table, and they have to come to the table with a view that they do want to make a different choice. In the meantime, our military preparedness is strong. Because of the situation, the President has ordered our military planners to have a full range of contingencies available, and they are ready. as I've told people many times, I will continue our diplomatic efforts until the first bomb drops. I'm gonna be confident that we're going to be successful.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but still to come, US FCC votes to dismantle rules regulating the businesses that connect consumers to the internet, grants broadband companies the power to potentially reshape Americans' online experiences. That and much more on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The story we thought we knew. The story of magnificence. The story of bloody battles. Of those who ruled and those who left their footprints. The story charting the course of our past. Talking history on Rajya Sabha TV.
Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira. The Federal Communications Commission in the US has decided to end net neutrality. The rules governing net neutrality have been in use since 2015, but after the vote, they will have no place now. Net neutrality essentially prevents internet service providers or ISPs from discriminating against websites on matters relating to speed and access to websites.
Voting along party lines, the U.S. Federal Communications Commission on Thursday repealed rules that ensure a free and open internet. The FCC voted 3-2 to repeal the rules. The approval of FCC Chairman Ajit Pai's proposal will allow internet service providers to decide what content consumers can access. Democrats, Hollywood, and companies like Google and Facebook urged Pai to keep the Obama-era rules that bar service providers from blocking, slowing access to, or charging more for certain content.
We're reversing the Obama-era FCC's unprecedented decision to apply Title II regulations to the internet. I'm proud to help end this 2-year experiment with heavy-handed regulation, this massive regulatory overreach. Prior to the FCC's 2015 decision, consumers and innovators alike benefited from a free and open internet. This was not because the government imposed utility-style regulation. It didn't. This was not because the FCC had a rule regulating internet conduct. It had none. Instead, through Republican and Democratic administrations alike, including through the first 6 years of the Obama administration, the FCC abided by a 20-year bipartisan consensus that the government should not control or heavily regulate internet access.
Consumer advocates and trade groups representing content providers have planned a legal challenge aimed at preserving those rules. At least 3 enforcement chiefs in the US said they will lead a multi-state lawsuit to challenge the reversal.
Internet service providers could charge you content or charge you to actually access certain content, which would be much more like cable news. If you look at countries where net neutrality protections don't exist, for example, Portugal, that's actually what we've seen, is where these companies, internet service providers, are actually charging people to access certain content.
Consumers are unlikely to see immediate changes resulting from the rule change, but smaller startups worry the lack of restrictions could drive up costs or lead to their content being blocked. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
India, Russia and China on Monday reiterated their resolve to fight terrorism. The RIC grouping also discussed in detail the situation in war-torn countries like Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq and other Middle Eastern countries. The trio has decided to work in tandem to act against weapons of mass destruction, including biological and chemical weapons. The next RIC meeting will take place in China.
Russia, India and China have decided to act unitedly against Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed and other terrorist organizations proscribed by the United Nations Security Council. The decision was taken at a meeting of the foreign ministers in Delhi on Monday. The meeting, held in a trilateral format, is popularly known as RIC. External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi were present for the meeting. The three countries also talked about the major regional and international issues in the new emerging situation. On terrorism, they resolved to combat proscribed organizations jointly.
While discussing terrorism, I put across my view that significant rise in acts of terrorism by terrorist organizations like Taliban, Daesh, Al-Qaeda and Lashkar-e-Taiba directly undermine international peace and security and endanger ongoing efforts to strengthen the global economy and ensure sustainable growth and development. India strongly recommends a comprehensive policy for dealing with global terrorism.
Fourth, we will strengthen international and regional cooperation on counter-terrorism, eliminate the breeding ground of terrorism, combat the three forces of regional terrorism, separatism and extremism. Fifth, we will facilitate the establishment of an open world economy.
Russia, India and China also discussed in detail situations in Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq and other Middle Eastern countries. They also decided to work in tandem to destroy weapons of mass destruction, including biological and chemical weapons. Russia has supported avenues of cooperation between India and China in the Eurasian region. On its part, China underlined the new avenues of cooperation among the three countries.
It is both useful and a format that allows to have a clear picture of the steps that should be taken to shape the current world order. Russia, India and China share this assessment. We want to see the world multipolar, that is an objective trend, the world that would be built upon the international law, the respect for the United Nations Charter principles.
As the core, the North-South cooperation as the main channel, and South-South cooperation as the supplement. 10th, we will promote the connectivity building of the Eurasian continent, follow the principle of extensive consultation, joint contribution and shared benefits, commit to policy, infrastructure, trade, financial and people-to-people connectivity, ensure that our connectivity initiatives complement instead of contradicting with each other, and supplement instead of conflicting with each other to foster scale effects and regional integration.
The three foreign ministers also held bilateral meetings separately before the formal RIC meet. They discussed bilateral issues and how not to allow small issues like Doklam stand in the way of their mutual cooperation. The RIC was established in 2002 with a view to create an atmosphere of understanding and trust among the three countries. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, much else has unfolded around the world this week. Here's a quick roundup of some other international news in Globe Watch. A train and a school bus collided near Perpignan in France, leaving at least 4 children dead and many others injured. As per reports, 11 of them were in critical condition. The bus had picked up pupils aged between 13 and 17 from a nearby secondary school before it was hit. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe, who visited the scene, said the task of identifying the victims was proving extremely difficult. Walt Disney Company on Thursday agreed to buy film, television and international businesses from Rupert Murdoch's 21st Century Fox in a $52.4 billion stock. Disney chief executive Bob Iger, who was previously expected to step down in 2019, will now stay on through 2021. Disney, which owns the ABC television network ESPN and has major studios in Hollywood, is set to launch its own streaming services aimed at competing against Netflix and Amazon. US prosecutors brought federal charges against the suspect in Monday's attempted suicide bombing in one of New York City's busiest commuter hubs, accusing him of supporting a foreign terrorist organization. Akayadullah, a 27-year-old Bangladeshi and self-described supporter of the radical group Islamic State, was also charged in a criminal complaint filed in U.S. District Court in Manhattan with bombing a public place, destruction of property by means of explosive, and use of destructive device. Israel announced the closure of its Gaza border crossing in response to daily rocket strikes from the Palestinian enclave. This after U.S. President Donald Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital stoked Palestinian anger. About 15 rockets have been fired into Israel since Trump's announcement. However, no serious injuries or damages were reported. Saudi-led coalition airstrikes hit a prison inside a police camp in Yemen's capital Sana'a, killing at least 35 people and injuring 80 others. Saudi-led coalition warplanes dropped 7 missiles on the police camp, which caused major destruction to almost all buildings inside the complex. According to reports, at least 35 were dead, including police, military police officers and soldiers, while more than 80 people were seriously injured. Well, let's now shift focus and bring you up to speed with all the sports news you might have missed this week in Sports Action. 12 times winner of the Champions League, Real Madrid will have to overcome a sizable obstacle when the Champions League resumes in February against Paris Saint-Germain. While 5 times champion, Barcelona will face English champions Chelsea. Tottenham Hotspur, who topped their group ahead of Real, will face Serie A champions and last season's runners-up Juventus. Manchester City, who registered 15 wins in a row in a single Premier League season, will face Swiss club Basel, and 5 times winner Bayern Munich will face Turkish club Besiktas. Kiev's mayor Vitaly Klitschko and Ukraine's soccer coach Andrei Shevchenko unveiled the 2018 Champions League final logo on Tuesday in Kiev, Ukraine. The Football Federation added a visual image of the Olympic National Sports Complex of Kiev in the logo, which is also the venue for the finals of the tournament, which will be held in May 2018. The Ukrainian capital will host the men's final on the 26th of May at the Olympic Stadium 2 days after staging the Women's Champions League final at the Valery Lobanovsky Dynamo Stadium. The Russian Olympic Committee President Alexander Zhukov said that the Russian Olympic Committee will support Russian athletes who choose to compete in next year's Winter Games in South Korea. He also added that the ROC will do its best to help Russian athletes competing at the Games and will hold serious talks with the International Olympic Committee in the near future to discuss the arrangement. Last week, the IOC banned Russia from the Pyeongchang Games for what it called manipulation of the anti-doping system. Former New Zealand netball chief executive Raelene Castle was named Rugby Australia's first female boss and became the first woman to take charge of one of the 4 main football codes in the country. Castle replaced Bill Pulver, who in August was asked to step down as soon as a replacement was found. Castle led the country's national body for netball for 6 years before moving back to Australia to take over the Bulldogs in 2013. And finally, the Changbai Mountains in northeast China witnessed a stunning light show by the Geminid meteors. Considered by sky watchers as one of the finest meteor showers in China's skies, the Geminid meteor shower occurs annually between December 4th and 17th. I'm going to leave you with these visuals from China. Until next time, this is Frank Pereira signing off.